What's up, everyone? We're back with another fantasy football video. Week 6 start sit decisions and fan questions. So in this video, reminder, fans that comment on my strategy video that's released every Tuesday morning, get a question answered in this video. So if you're looking to get your fantasy football start sit questions answered and you need a second opinion from someone, comment on my strategy videos that the most recent one is listed in the description below, and I will include your question for week 6 and future weeks moving forward. I'm going to be doing this every week this season. So keep commenting if you need assistance with your fantasy football team, and if you need somebody to bounce ideas off of, I reply to all my fans who comment, so please take advantage of that. If you're interested in more content, please check out the description below. I make a wide variety of content, not only fantasy football, but other stuff too. So check that out if you're interested. So before I get into the fan questions, I'm going to talk about some news from this week. So the important theme of this season is you have to make sure that you have the backups to your running backs. So a lot of running back injuries. And as I forewarned at the beginning of the season, this is very common in fantasy football for running backs to get injured often. I know that it seems in this season there's a lot more running back injuries, but there's actually historically always been running back injuries because it's the most commonly injured position. Those guys are always getting tackled, beat up frequently. So make sure if you have an elite running back that hasn't already gotten injured, like a Benny Snell for Pittsburgh, for Tennessee, Jeremy McNichols, maybe consider Darrington Evans as well when he comes back from IR. Guys like that really haven't gotten injured yet, you want to make sure that you have the handcuff for them. I've got a very descriptive video on that listed in the description below from, I believe, about 2 weeks ago. So check that out if you want some more information. But most recent news, Nick Chubb is injured now. There's potential that D'Ernest Johnson could be a very sneaky pickup. I'm not sure what his role will be compared to the timeshare that they give to Kareem Hunt, most likely. But if Nick Chubb is out, that is a very sneaky ad to consider. I think a lot of people will jump to Demetric Felton, but he's more of a gadget type player who's more of a slot receiver, kind of more in the mold of Kareem Hunt. So I see them more going to somebody like D'Ernest Johnson if they want to have an early down back. Other ones are Khalil Herbert, a guy who got some carries last week. I actually wasn't really sure how well that would transfer into week 6 because a lot of his carries were at the end of the game. But now that Damian Harris is on the COVID list, Khalil Herbert is injured. So if you have a running back that is giving you a lot of points, make sure you get the handcuff for them. Or if not, constantly keep up with the news and make sure that you're checking in on these guys when they come in, because if you see a running back out there like that, that's an instant plug and play guy right there. So Herbert, another one of those guys that's kind of popped up on this list as well. So just keep that in mind. Check out my handcuff video if you want to see some more information on that. The trade deadline. So I haven't really talked about this yet on my channel, but the NFL trade deadline I think is interesting for fantasy context, not only because of the changes that will happen to a particular player or team when somebody gets traded away, but because of how the hype of rumors can affect someone's value. So the trade that just happened Friday that was very important was Zach Ertz getting traded to Arizona. Zach Ertz and Goddard were for the other tight end for Philadelphia at the time. Also, I was not high on either of them because they took away each other's touches. But now that Ertz is going to Arizona, it helps Ertz value because Arizona, highly explosive offense, as well as Dallas Goedert, because now he's going to have the targets to himself. But consider, though, that a lot of times the immediate aftermath of this trade will increase their value in fantasy football trades because, you know, in the case of Zach Ertz, he's going to get all these targets now that he's on Arizona. We look at Max Williams and some of the games that he had that went off, and we might jump to that conclusion. But you're not going to get value in a trade for Zach Ertz as high as you will after he's traded to the Cardinals. So my advice is that in the wake of this news, you got a week until his next game with Arizona. try to see if you could flip him for somebody that will be more consistent for you, because I think Ertz will be very much like Max Williams, where he switches off targets. I don't see him as somebody that's going to be a consistently reliable Zach Ertz from 2017, for example. Just consider that. And I say that because Odell Beckham is also in the trade rumor news, and there's going to be a lot of rumors of things that are crazy, like Odell Beckham Jr. getting traded to the Chiefs, and then now he's going to be the Chiefs' secondary wide receiver next to Tyreek Hill. There's going to be people that believe things like that and buy into a player who's generally been, his performance, if he didn't have the name that he had, is of somebody who is not rostered in fantasy football. The only reason he is because it's Odell Beckham and he's going off of his past value. So this is a good opportunity if you do have Odell with these trade rumors swirling to try to see if you can flip him, because this is driving up his value. So keep that in mind if you have some players like that are in the trade news for the real NFL, because that will potentially drive up their fantasy value to sell them. We go now to our fan questions, and thank you for all of the fans out there who are commenting. My channel is small, but I do appreciate those of you that comment every week. I want to give a special shout out to some fans like Ryan H., who comments every week, Joe, who comments quite often as well. Andrew has frequently commented and left some great content. Nav, another fan who's supportive of the channel. These are all guys that are commenting every week, asking very insightful questions, and that's what helps drive this channel as well. So I thank all of you guys for all your support and helping my channel grow, and hopefully I can help you as well with your fantasy football season too. So we'll start with Ryan H's question. Ryan's question is with regards to his running back core, as well as some other start-sit questions as well. So his running back core, unfortunately, has fallen, had a lot of injuries that have hurt his season, and this has happened to a lot of people as well. So as a particular highlight, he had Christian McCaffrey and David Montgomery. Both of them are injured right now. Other running backs he has on his team, he did pick up Devontae Booker, which is a good pickup. Kenneth Gainwell, Alexander Mattison, Samaje Perine are also there as well. And then he also has Michael Carter and Elijah Mitchell from San Francisco, who are both on bye. So my question, he's picking the two running backs to start. Christian McCaffrey doesn't look like he'll play. Alexander Mattison, his value is probably going to go down again because Dalvin Cook is coming back likely. So Montgomery is not playing either. So Devontae Booker, you're putting in as your running back. That is your RB1 out of this group. If you played Gainwell, then that's your other running back. But if you did not play Gainwell, then you have to make some changes. So you can't play the guys on bye, but I would not recommend dropping either of those two players because they have significant roles on the team. The player I'd recommend you drop next is Samaje Perine. He was mostly a 1 week smash play because of Joe Mixon's injury, but Joe Mixon is progressing along, and Samaje Perine is on the COVID list now and is likely not going to play. So that's the one you drop next, even though he can be a valuable handcuff. I think I would rather have Carter and Mitchell because of their potential on a bye. Running backs to pick up. So he showed me the players that are available. The best players that are out there to me, number one is Alex Collins. Chris Carson is still not practicing in full, so Alex Collins is a great add. Chris Evans is somebody else to consider as well from the Bengals, because if Joe Mixon is limited in practice, the touches that Samaje Perine had, which he did play well last week because they were limiting Joe Mixon's workload, that will likely go to Chris Evans, who has got a lot of receiving versatility. So that is a strong consideration as well. Those are not the most highly recommended plays of the options out there, but considering your backfield is depleted, I would recommend trying to hit a home run with those guys. But Collins first, Evans second out of those. Wide receivers, A.B., hopefully you played him. Pittman and Woods are the guys you start. And then tight end, Hockenson is struggling, but I think you just have to keep rolling with him. The options that you showed me on waivers are not necessarily standout guys. I would give Hockenson another chance. And then for your kicker, I think it's just best to leave Carlson there. I think he's got an improved matchup this upcoming week. So the offense is also in a great position to continue to succeed in terms of the kicking game because it's not highly efficient, and but it is gonna put them in position to kick field goals. So I think for the time being, he is still a great ad for you he's still a good kicker to roll with, is what I'm essentially saying. But thank you, Ryan, for your question. Question from Symbolic Scar. I like your name. Myles Gaskin or Mike Davis? So I'm assuming this is a who to roster or rest of season question since Davis is on a bye this week. But I like Gaskin more rest of season because I think Gaskin is going to have improved performance with Tua when he becomes healthy again, for one. And then another consideration as well is that you can buy Gaskin for lower value than Mike Davis. Also, Mike Davis is, I'd say, pretty inefficient in terms of his production on the field. Atlanta has kind of turned their backfield over to Cordero Patterson, a former wide receiver, which that doesn't exactly suggest a lot of confidence in Davis as a traditional running back. He's an older guy. I haven't really been too high on him this season anyway, so I would personally rather have Gaskin out of those two. Question from N Savvy. So a trade question. These are all revolving around Myles Gaskin type trades. So Myles Gaskin for Javonte Williams. Definitely do that. Javonte Williams, his value is going to increase as the season goes on. They've had some tough matchups to start the season, but that will improve moving forward for them. And Javonte Williams also in a position where, as the more explosive running back for the most part, compared to Melvin Gordon, I think he will get more touches as the season goes along. It's been a dead even split, but he's a great guy to buy low on, whereas Myles Gaskin kind of got some questions about him. That being said, I still prefer Myles Gaskin over Mike Davis. This is another trade. Hockenson and Gaskin for Devontae Parker, Javonte Williams, and Mike Gesicki. So that's the counter to that, to try to pry Hockenson away. That is a tough call, but I would go with the Javonte Williams again because I think that is the most upside of your options. Gesicki is not a tight end that I'm super confident in, but I do think that you can find tight ends to potentially stream, and I think that's worth giving up Hockenson for to get somebody like Javonte Williams. Devontae Parker to me is kind of a moot point. Honestly, I really am not even a fan of rostering him, but just a consideration there. Gaskin for Allen Robinson is the third part of this question. So I think that really depends on your record. If you have a winning record and you can afford to wait on your wide receiver core, then I would, or if you have great wide receivers and you can afford to wait on Allen Robinson, I would definitely recommend trying to pick up Allen Robinson for a running back who has been inconsistent this season. And if you have good running back depth as well. I generally like to try to get a running back in return, though, so you can use, because he's going to be, almost everybody who owns Allen Robinson wants to get rid of him. So you make it tough on that guy that's trying to sell him away and say, well, I'm losing a running back. I want one of your running backs in return. And honestly, I think it's worth it if you can get one of these handcuff guys, especially with the injuries that we've seen so far in the running back position so far this season. Question from Mark. Mark's question is another trade question. Kyler Murray, Darrell Henderson, and Christian Kirk for Jared Goff, CeeDee Lamb, Barkeley, Higgins, and Garropolo. So, in my opinion, so Garropolo and Goff, and this is a 2-quarterback league to keep in mind. So for 2-quarterback leagues, I would personally rather have the Kyler Murray side of this trade. You do get CeeDee Lamb and Barkley, which are significant adds, but I think that with Barkley's injury, I just have a lot of concern about his durability to hold up the rest of the season. It's now becoming a habitual thing where he's always getting hurt, and unfortunately, a lot of it is not really his fault. His team is not very good. But Darrell Henderson is a running back who has a lot of volume, and I think is a better player to roster just simply because he's going to have more games on the horizon. Consider the Giants even have a bye coming up too, so that's another week loss for Barkley. And I think that the other thing too is that you're getting Kirk. You have Kirk. You have the potential to stack Kirk and Murray. That's another very risky move, but I would personally rather have the Kyler Murray side in that 2 quarterback scenario, given the health concerns of Barkley. But I do understand the hopefulness in getting Saquon Barkley back to his old self. I'm just trying to be realistic in terms of what I think will happen. Question from Toney. So Toney is trying to pick up a tight end for this week. I'm not sure from the context of who the starting tight end is on a bye, but I'm assuming it's Kyle Pitts because he's the one on bye. But the question is, who do you drop for the tight end and which tight end to pick up? So he's looking to pick up either Ricky Seals-Jones or Hunter Henry. I'll start with that. I would recommend, since you're only using these tight ends for 1 week, to go with Ricky Seals-Jones. I think he's got a great matchup with Kansas City where they're going to rely on him quite frequently, and I think that's a great play against a bad defense. I think that Hunter Henry is another guy that has a matchup with Dallas that could be very fruitful as well, but I could see, because they're operating with the New England offense, which oftentimes is very unpredictable, that it would be better that you could run the risk of Hunter Henry just putting up a complete dud, which has happened before this season. So I would personally go with Ricky Seals-Jones, but I do like Hunter Henry more rest of season because of Logan Thomas's eventual return. So among the players to drop, so very difficult decision. You have to bench players of Ridley on a bye, Claypool, Hubbard, Collins, Pollard, and Toney. He owns Collins because he has Chris Carson. So since Chris Carson is very questionable for this week, that's a very tough call, but I think you've got to drop Toney. I am generally not a fan of dropping running backs because you just don't want to put guys that could become a starter in the matter of an injury out there. Toney is somebody that can be a starter and go off like he did last week. But a strong consideration with Toney is that, one, the receivers on his team that are all generally starting ahead of him, like Slayton, Golladay, and Shepard, are all dealing with injuries. So they will eventually come back. The other consideration, too, is that this week they're playing the Rams, which the Rams, people are saying, oh, the defense is down. But the Rams have also played some great offenses so far, like Arizona, Tampa Bay, that have kind of skewed those stats in the wrong direction. But so as the number one receiver, likely assignment with Jalen Ramsey, I'm skeptical that Toney will be able to recreate that value. So I think unless you're in a position where your wide receiver core is weak, Toney, I would recommend dropping Toney. No pun intended there or anything like that. But that is the guy I would recommend you drop, is Kadarius Toney out of that group. Especially if you're in a standard league. PPR, I would maybe consider dropping Collins just because I know you own Carson, but Collins and the Seattle running game in general has not been efficient this year. So I would have doubts of Collins performing. I would not drop Pollard because of the high upside there if Zeke were to get hurt. I would also not drop Hubbard because of CMC's injury. So, yeah, that would be the guy I would probably drop next, is Collins, if you're not comfortable dropping your receiver. Question from Joe, a.k.a. My Topics and Opinions. Picking up a second DST. So he owns New England, but New England has got Dallas this week, so understandably not a great play. But you also do not want to drop New England because they're playing the Jets next week. And next week is a huge bye week, so you're going to need those points made up on the defense, and New England is the prime defense to do that. So I would recommend you hold New England. But then it becomes a difficult decision of who to drop. Mike Davis, Patterson, Marvin Jones, Julio, Chris Carson, or Damian Harris. And again, this is a very tough call. Those are all very productive players, but I think you got to go Marvin Jones here. For one, Jacksonville has a week 7 bye, so you're not going to use him next week. Another consideration, too, is kind of like I said with Tony's question, is that you want to hold your running backs as much as you can. Injuries can happen, and that thrusts them immediately into a position. Whereas if receivers get hurt, they're still generally splitting it among 3 players. I talked about this a little bit in some of my previous videos that I made over the summer, if you're interested. terms of receiver and running back strategy. But to me, I think Marvin Jones is the one you drop. It really depends on what the rest of your receiving core looks like. But Marvin Jones, he can be a very good player, but he's also up and down at times because of a poor offensive scheme. I think if you are set at running back, then maybe consider Mike Davis because he has not been efficient. But again, if anything were to happen to Patterson, they've utilized the running back in the passing game so much this season that Davis becomes a lot more attractive. So I would not recommend you do that. I would not recommend dropping Harris or Carson either for similar reasons. And then Julio, you can't drop him because of how talented he can be at times as well. Question from Andrew. Andrew has a few questions I'm going to go in depth on as well. So trying to pick up a tight end for week 8 on his bye. So he was asking about my opinion of which tight end would be a good pickup for week 8. So in my personal opinion, I don't hold tight ends for a few weeks out like you would with a defense, for example, because of a matchup on during bye weeks. Because honestly, tight ends are very difficult to predict in terms of, they're playing the 32nd ranked defense against tight ends, but then you're also throwing out Jordan Akins from Houston, and then you're relying on somebody who barely gets involved. I generally do not play that game because tight ends, they're either involved in the offense or they're not. And I don't think that you can game a matchup. I think what you got to do is you got to just play it by ear. And when you get to that week is pick up a tight end, because to me, it's not worth rostering somebody who could return zeros for you for 2 straight weeks until you get to week 8. So I would hold on that. Kicker question. So Matt Gay or Daniel Carlson? So Matt Gay is in a better offense, but I like Daniel Carlson more because kickers are better in fantasy football when their offense is not scoring touchdowns in every drive. Look at Harrison Butker, for example, who is number 1 or 2 picked up off the board, depending on your league. But he is performing outside the top 12 right now because the Chiefs are not, when they're driving down the field, they're getting touchdowns. They're not getting field goals. So similarly, the Rams with Matt Gay, they're getting touchdowns a lot. So Matt Gay is not typically going to be getting long field goals, whereas Daniel Carlson has attempted quite a bit of field goals this year because the offense struggles in the red zone. So I would prefer Daniel Carlson out of those guys. And then trade question revolving around Tom Brady. So I talked Tom Brady sell high candidate in my video that was released on Tuesday. And this is a great trade that illustrates this. Brady and Joe Mixon and James Conner for Derrick Henry and Dak Prescott. So prime example of what you want to try to do with Tom Brady's value. So Tom Brady as a name. So quarterbacks in general, you can get a ton of value on if you have multiple ones and then you're trying to sell the guy that's the bigger name. Because a lot of people really do not follow fantasy football closely that own teams, and they'll just say, oh, I'm getting Tom Brady. He's the GOAT. But they're not realizing that they're giving up Dak Prescott, who is returning almost the same value in terms of points that Tom Brady is. So, and you're getting Derrick Henry back, who's playing a top 3 running back production right now, for an injured running back and another running back who's in a timeshare with Chase Edmonds at almost a 50-50 split. So that's a huge win. That I would make that trade 100% of the time. And that's exactly the kind of thing you want to try to do if you have somebody like Tom Brady, is try to drop down to like a Dak Prescott, a Justin Herbert, a Jalen Hurts, another great example of somebody that would give you great value. And then get that elite running back in return. Or even just like a flex value. Like if you took out Mixon and Conner and then you're getting, let's say, Prescott and Conner, I would still do that trade because you're getting a running back that's going to give you some good value and depth. Now Andrew's questions revolved around who to cut. So the running backs he owns are Christian McCaffrey and Hubbard, Joe Mixon and Perine. So he's got the 2 handcuff combinations there, James Conner and Kenneth Gainwell. So I'm assuming that Gainwell you didn't cut, so he's locked into your roster because he played. Wide receivers are DJ Moore, Mike Williams, Terry McLaurin, Cortland Sutton, Christian Kirk, Hunter Renfrow, and AJ Green. So I think out of that, you cut AJ Green. that's me personally. I think that he doesn't really give you a lot other than just a name. I mean, he's had some good production this season, so if you can't flip him, I think it's just better to cut him, is what I would personally recommend. I would not recommend cutting any of your running backs, given the injury history of guys like Mixon and Christian McCaffrey so far. So yeah, thank you for your question. Then last question is from Mr. Suave. So his question revolves around ways to rebuild your roster if you've gotten off to a bad start and you don't have a lot of depth to work with. So his unfortunately some trades didn't work out. So his team right now is quarterback Daniel Jones, running back Josh Jacobs, Fournette, and Zach Moss. And then other players he has on his team at wide receiver, Odell Beckham, Sterling Shepard, Emmanuel Sanders, and Rashad Bateman, tight end Travis Kelce. So if you played Fournette, that gave you a lot of value for this week. So that's a great starting point. I think at running back, so my first recommendations to you are try to trade Odell Beckham because he's really not giving you anything. I don't think it's worth holding him and on your roster and hoping he can turn it around. I would try to flip him for a more consistent receiver like a Hunter Renfrow or something like that, which you might be able to do. Sterling Shepard is also in a tough situation where if you don't have an IR spot, you have to make some difficult roster decisions to try to get value on him. But there's some great receiving and running back options available on waivers that you can try to do to, like, if you can't trade Odell, then I would just drop him for one of these guys that could be potentially out there, like a Khalil Herbert. Maybe you have guys like A.J. Dillon available. I'm not entirely sure that's likely, but that's a consideration too. You know, other guys that are not heavily rostered but have some good value, especially in PPR, are Jeremy McNichols, Brandon Bolden, guys like that, potential considerations too. And then receivers, so Amon-Ra St. Brown, a guy that I like. You could take a flyer on some guys that have up and down performances like a Rondale Moore or a Kadarius Toney. And even like some receivers that are not heavily involved but have great matchups for this week, like a DeAndre Carter. Guys like that are players that you can consider picking up. You got to play play it week by week. Find guys that have great matchups that can give you a 1 week play. Get yourself one win at a time, and you can get yourself back into this thing. So don't give up, because as the fantasy footballers talk about, which is a show that is very informative in my opinion, if you haven't watched it before, they always talk about how people call into their show and they start out 0-5 or 1-4, and then they turn it around. And a lot of it is because a lot of your other owners, they don't maintain their interest in fantasy football. So you're playing somebody some weeks who's just leaving players in on bye because he just forgot to change his roster. That happens quite a bit. So keep that in mind as well. So thank you for all of those who commented. For the rest of this video, I'm going to go through some rosters and make rosters that were given to me of teams and recommend start-sit decisions for those teams that are out there. So we'll go through that in about 10 minutes of time, and then we'll close it out here. So if you got any questions leading up to week 6, I'm not going to be able to make another fantasy football start-sit video, but you can comment and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can and prep for Sunday. So this roster for this week, this team is called Disposition Reflection Triad. It's a Tool song. I don't know if you've heard that. I have a reaction to that song, by the way. So this team is quarterback Justin Herbert, running back Austin Eckler, Damian Williams, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Chase Edmonds, Jamal Williams, Zach Moss, Samaje Perine, and Darrell Williams. So this is a classic example of a roster that does a great job building running back depth. Other receivers they've got on this team is Devontae Adams, or excuse me, the receivers they have on this team, Devontae Adams, Justin Jefferson, Tyler Lockett, Michael Pittman, and Allen Robinson. And then tight end TJ Hockenson, Rams DST, and then kicker is Daniel Carlson. So the recommendation here of who to start and sit. So Austin Eckler, lock in as your RB1. That's really no questions asked regarding that, in my opinion. The next one that you play after that, so this is a PPR league. I think you go Chase Edmonds here if you need another running back play. I think another strong consideration as well, since you got to fill that last spot since Damian Williams is out. If you can't get Chase Edmonds, I think a strong consideration as well is Darrell Williams in a Chiefs backfield that is expected to score a lot of points. I like that play potentially. Wide receivers, Devontae Adams and Justin Jefferson are locked in. I think you can make an argument potentially for Michael Pittman over Tyler Lockett, but I personally would rather play Lockett because I think against the Houston Texans, Indianapolis could get up on them pretty quickly, and they could just turn it over entirely to the running game. Whereas I could see Seattle being behind and them needing to throw it quite often to Tyler Lockett. And then Hockenson, I again recommend this team just go ahead and roll with. So this next team is called Team Lucky. So Team Lucky is got Tom Brady, Derrick Henry, Antonio Gibson as their starters. The other starters are Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Cole Kmet at tight end, Tyler Boyd, Bills defense, Matt Gay, backup quarterback Josh Allen, Josh Jacobs, Leonard Fournette, Michael Thomas, Tony Pollard, Henry Ruggs, and Jacoby Myers. So, yeah, so this team sat Fournette, so that's unfortunate. So for starting quarterbacks, I think you have to well, he already locked in Brady, but you should have played Allen that week because Allen gives you rushing value. You got to try to trade this team has got to try to trade Tom Brady, in my opinion. Derrick Henry, Antonio Gibson, Josh Jacobs, or Pollard. So I would recommend you play Henry. That's really not too many questions there. Gibson, I have a lot of concerns about going up against the Chiefs, but I still think he's better value than Josh Jacobs right now, who's really not been very efficient this season. But I lean Jacobs here because I think the Washington football team is going to fall behind, and then you could see quite a bit of J.D. McKissick. So I would recommend Josh Jacobs on this team. Pollard is only really a dart throw, in my opinion. Wide receivers, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin has already been locked in. So for the last receiver, Tyler Boyd, Ruggs, or Meyers. I recommend Meyers going up against Dallas because this is a PPR format for one, and then two, great matchup against Dallas, and Meyers is going to have quite a bit of the timeshare. And then for tight end, Cole Kmet really should not be rostered anymore. This team should try to trade Tom Brady and see if they can get a tight end. So yeah, that's this team. We will now go to Team Yale Youpers. They have quarterback Mac Jones, running back Najee Harris, running back Javonte Williams, Devonta Smith, Jalen. They literally have all rookies on this team. Jalen Waddle, Pat Freiermuth, Rondale Moore, Bucks D, and Rodrigo Blankenship. And then the bench consists of Pitts, Carter, Elijah Moore, and Zach Wilson all on a bye. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Terrace Marshall, and Chuba Hubbard. Why does this team have all rookies? That's probably why they're 1-4. But of the guys that you have that you could still play, Mac Jones is the guy you play out of your quarterbacks, but honestly you should probably drop Wilson and stream somebody else. Najee Harris, Javonte Williams, and Chuba Hubbard. So I would play Chuba Hubbard over Javonte Williams. So you're playing Harris, Chuba, and then sit Javonte Williams personally. Wide receivers, Devonta Smith already played. So it's between Jalen Waddle, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Rondale Moore, and Terrace Marshall. That's not a great group. I would probably recommend Waddle, I think, because good matchup against Jacksonville to fill that wide receiver 2. And then for your flex, this team has really not got a lot of great options. So I would just take the flyer on Amon-Ra St. Brown to get involved as an up-and-coming receiver in a matchup where they're going to need to throw quite often. So yeah, next team is Team Metzger. This team, Sam Darnold, quarterback, Alexander Mattison, running back with Giovanni Bernard, who has already played. That's unfortunate. Marquise Brown, Mike Williams, Dawson Knox, DJ Moore are the wide receivers, tight ends, and flex. And then the bench consists of Samuel and Elijah Mitchell on a bye, Rob Gronkowski, Odell Beckham Jr., Marvin Jones, Kenneth Gainwell, and Daniel Jones. So between Daniel Jones and Sam Darnold, I would Daniel Jones, I think I would kind of prefer. I would go Sam Darnold just because Jones coming off the injury and going up against a strong defensive front with Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey as cornerback. I could see quite a bit of turnovers in that game, so I would go Sam Darnold just to play it safe. Running back, you need to fill the RB1 position. Not a lot of options here. You got Mattision and Gainwell. Well, Gainwell already played. So you got to go to the waivers, and I think that you pretty much have to try to cut. You should cut Daniel Jones, to be honest with you, and then just roster one quarterback, or Odell Beckham Jr. But yeah, because Madison's not going to give you a lot of value, so you got to go to the waivers for that. For what I would recommend to this team. Wide receivers: Marquise Brown and Mike Williams. Those guys you play. DJ Moore, I think you play too at flex, so that locks in your receivers. And then for Dawson Knox, tight end, I think that's a solid play too. Team Kershaw is the next team. Quarterback is Lamar Jackson. No other quarterbacks in this team. For running backs, so Alvin Kamara, Nick Chubb are the options. Then you also have Myles Gaskin, and Nyheim Hines. That's rough. So I think with Kamara on a bye and Chubb likely not playing, I think you have to go with Gaskin and Hines, but I think you've got to try to go to the waivers and get somebody else. Wide receivers, Calvin Ridley, A.J. Brown, T. Higgins, Brandon Cooks. Also has Brandon Ayuk on a bye. And still rostering Chark even though he's on IR. See, that's the thing is like some of these fantasy owners and rosters, they just don't keep up with it continually. So if you can just stay on top of it every day, that gives you a significant edge over a lot of your opponents. So I think you play Cooks, AJ Brown, and T. Higgins is what I would recommend in that order. I only say that because Brandon Cooks in a PPR is going to get a ton of volume over A.J. Brown, although A.J. Brown does have a very strong matchup as well, going up against a great offense. They're going to need to throw quite often to keep up with them. And then for tight end, it's either Logan Thomas or Noah Fant, and he hasn't moved Logan Thomas out of his starting position. So hopefully he puts in Noah Fant and realizes that. And then this last team I'm going to talk about is called Team Thomas. So Team Thomas, the quarterback is Dak Prescott. The running backs are Joe Mixon. The quarterbacks are Dak Prescott and Baker Mayfield and Ryan Tannehill. So first of all, this team needs to cut Baker Mayfield and Ryan. No, you hold Ryan Tannehill because Prescott's on a bye next week, but you cut Baker for sure. You do not need him if you have a guy like Prescott. And then, so start Prescott over Tannehill, but then you can use Tannehill next week when Prescott's on a bye. And then for running back, Joe Mixon, Darrell Henderson, Saquon Barkley, DeAndre Swift, Ronald Jones. Pretty good running back core. So I would recommend DeAndre Swift is running back 1, Darrell Henderson running back 2, and then Mixon you could consider in your flex. So I'll look at these receiving options. You got Tyreek Hill, Adam Thielen, Corey Davis bye, Sterling Shepard, injury concerns. Yeah, so I would go Tyreek Hill wide receiver 1. I would probably play Thielen over Shepard. It's a pretty scary proposition, but Thielen has a better track record in general, and Sterling Shepard off the hamstring injury could be very disappointing. And then play play Joe Mixon in your flex. And then tight end decision is between Dallas Goedert, who already played, and Darren Waller. But honestly, that really shouldn't be a decision either. That guy should be dropping Goddard. So that's all I got for this video. Once again, if you have questions for week 6 that didn't get answered in this video, please comment below and I will do my best to get to you by Sunday. So thank you for your support. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.